One of my students, Claudia, said, you know, no matter what happens to me in my life, nothing is ever going to take away meeting Ed Perlmutter in his office in Washington, D.C. Nothing's ever going to take away standing in the spot where Martin Luther King gave a speech. Nothing's going to take away the feeling of being in the room where Anne Frank wrote her diary. She said, I know I can do anything, and these things can't be taken away from me. Because kids see that houses have been taken away, especially in the last couple of years. Jobs are gone, money's gone, family members are gone. We had one student who, whatever adult wasn't in jail that week, was taking care of him. It was horrible. And these experiences, children are beginning to believe they're building their own set of resiliency inside of them, and no matter what life throws at them, they see they can go on and make it no matter what. They don't need to depend on somebody else. They can make things happen in their life. And with having the nonprofit foundation that backs them, they always can't believe that there's people out there they've never met who are willing to give money to help them make their life better. And they say, I feel such a sense of responsibility, and all of them say, we want to come back and give our money back. And we actually had that happen. We had a student who drove me nuts, and I didn't think he was going to make it to Europe, and he would whine, you know, I can't do it because of X, and my mom can't help, and my dad this, and I'm like, you know, Robert, nothing's impossible. And he ended up making it to Europe. And he said, you know, when I have my first job, I'm going to come back and give you my paycheck. And we're all like, yeah, right. What teenager's going to do that? And sure enough, one morning, his mother showed up with an envelope of cash and went in and gave it to my coworker and said, Robert said you would know what this is for. And he cashed his whole first paycheck and donated it right back to Keep. These children are amazing. And I think that gets lost. I think when people hear about students in poverty, they think of a lot of kids sitting there with their hand out, or parents sitting there with their hand out. And they get lost in the fact that there are a lot of kids and families working behind their students and wanting to know more. Whatever your political views on illegal immigration, it doesn't really matter when you have a child sitting in front of you that you teach. So I won't get into that, but when kids will say to me, when they start hearing about stories about children who had to live with false papers, or parents who lived with false papers who were trying to cross a border, they're like, oh yeah, you know, that's happening in my family. My parents are living with papers that aren't true, or they're having to hide their identity because they're here without documentation, and they have been told by their parents, you know, don't tell a lot to school officials about who you are. Some kids don't have their right names. Unfortunately, we find that out as we try and travel to Europe. And kids, we had an incident where a girl thought she was a legal citizen, and that's what her mother had always told her. That was the narrative of the family. You're here illegally, you were born here, you're an American, but this girl had never seen her birth certificate. But I mean, what 12-year-old wants to see their birth certificate? I mean, usually, if your parents say you were born here, this is your mom, this is your dad, why would you question it? Until she started raising money for a Europe trip, and her mom came to talk to us and said, she's not here legally, and that's not her name. And so when she found that out, you can imagine the parallels that she starts to feel from the Holocaust. Of course, it's different, but some of those seeds that are from the Holocaust are still here today. And the taking away rights bits by bits. And again, even though I've been teaching in this neighborhood for 25 years, I can still be shocked. Last fall, I was taking a group of kids with me to work at Colorado Horse Park because I run a summer day camp, and I was doing a booth for a festival that they were having, and I hired some of my girls who were going to Europe to talk with me. And they said, Miss Olson, have you heard about the roundups that's happening at Avanza? It's this little store. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So apparently, it sounds like it was Homeland Security. It was going into this store on Saturdays and stopping random people and asking them for their papers, which is illegal. They weren't suspected of any crime. They hadn't been doing anything wrong other than shopping on a Saturday. And so they had a net that would run through the store that would say, they'd come in the store and they would try and rush everybody who was here without papers out the back. And this one girl's parents were without papers, so they had a plan. What she should do someday if she comes home and finds her parents not there, who she should go to, and who she should stay with. And so that, she said, Miss Olson, when that started happening, it made me think a lot of the books that we've read. And I'm like, okay, wait, stop the car. This can't be happening in Denver in 2008. Eric Kahn has changed the Westwood neighborhood's children. He's a Holocaust survivor here in Denver who was hidden as a child from the time he was 4 to the time he was about 6 and a half, I believe. Can't remember the details exactly. But he comes to speak to my children every year, and my kids love him. Kids place. I mean, this has been 18 years he's been coming in and speaking to my kids. Kids will go over and over and over talking about him and how much he has meant to them. Yes, they take that away. In fact, this high school trip I was telling you about, you know where they want to go. They want to go to his small town in Germany, Mannheim, Germany, and they want to see his mother's grave. He found out this summer that the town has set a plaque to her. She's the one, she died in Auschwitz, and he didn't even know. He found out just this summer, and through a bunch of coincidences, my kids happened to be with him on the day that he found out, and they're so moved. When we were at the Memorial de la Shoah in Paris, they went there, and his mother's name is on the wall, and it's something that no matter what, they may forget from me, you know, all the countries in the European Union, they may forget who the, you know, the Prime Minister of Paris is, all these other things, but they're never going to forget meeting a Holocaust survivor, especially Eric, who comes year after year. I want young educators to recognize they can make a difference. You know, I see so many young educators come in jaded, like it's not going to make any difference. You know, they're kids of poverty. You know, oh, what are they going to do? You know, it doesn't. They're snotty. Or even, I know someone who's teaching at a very wealthy private school, and she's like, the kids are whiny, the parents are demanding. But there's so much more to education than that. I want my legacy to be that you can do whatever you set your mind to do with kids. That there's so much possibility, the energy of youth and the creativity. You know, I want people to remember the generations after me, you know, and remember the students of poverty and the families of poverty, that there's so much, and that whole genocide education and the Holocaust and all the lessons, I hate that phrase, the lessons we can learn, but there's so much that we need to still examine about how our world reacted and didn't react. Students and families of poverty aren't just sitting there with their hands out. They're willing to work hard, and I think all of us are one step away from being destitute at many times, especially when the economy now, I'm sure many people have heard more stories about this, but you know, there but the grace of God go I many times, I think, when I hear some of the stories of things that have happened to people that have landed them where they are. They're not hopeless, and they're not lazy, and it's not that they don't care about their kids, it's just circumstances in their life have brought them to this. And you know, Holocaust survivors, I'm indebted to the people who have been through genocides who are willing to speak out, and that is the other message. I had the pleasure of hearing a woman this summer, Hadida, whose last name I still can't pronounce, was a survivor of the Rwandan genocide. She spoke at a Belfer conference I arranged here in Denver for the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and she was so inspirational, and I'm so thankful to all the people who have been through a genocide who are still willing to relive that experience and tell those of us what their experience was like. So we hopefully, I don't want to say we can prevent it from ever happening again, because I know that's trite, but that we can make this world a better place, a world that's not as likely to allow a genocide to continue forward as the past.